All right, so what's the difference between perspective drawing and observational drawing? Perspective is a method that in which you can calculate optical the optical illusion of they have all kinds of definitions of it in the classroom, but it's it's easier to conceptualize realistic scenes with perspective, but perspective is based on observation. If you look at the horizon line, you're going to see that most things will, things that move away from you, like railroad tracks is the easiest one. They move away from you, but they look like as they get further away, they get closer together and like they touch, but they never really do touch. They just seem to get infinitely closer together. And that can be mathematically calculated if you are really into math, or it can be geometrically computed on a piece of paper with a ruler. That helps you when you are looking at objects. Like say you're going to draw a cube, for instance. If you know there's one thing in the perspective drawing that in the cube is so totally wrong, I just want to scream. But most of the other stuff is pretty good, so I haven't complained. If you can sketch out a cube just from your mind, you should automatically know that these lines will eventually get closer together, right? They don't really. If you draw a cube like you think a cube would be, well, I guess that would be like there's one side, there's the second side, there's the third side, there's the fourth side. And how do I get the sixth side here? Because it's supposed to go on between these two and on this end. And you can't do it because you can't see all sides at the same time. You can't totally wrap your head around an object. I have a block here. I'm at the wrong desk for this kind of work. But get yourself, even for observational drawing or for perspective drawing, and for any kind of drawing, just for practice, it's a good idea to get yourself a few geometric objects that you can use to observe and calculate and test your theories on how things work. So for observational drawing and for perspective drawing, this is very good. So I get these little blocks at it was like AC Moore or maybe Michael's, Joann's, any craft store. So, and you can get the wooden balls too. And I just paint these ones. I painted black. I have a bunch that are painted white, so I have a variety. I didn't think I'd pull them out, or I would have pulled them out in advance. Sorry about that. Oops, I break things. Here's a white one. So we'll be using this next week when I do spheres. But it's kind of nice to have both the white and the black, just because really the only thing you guys need to worry about at this point in your career is, that's why artists have studios. My studio is half computer and half real, or what I consider real. Back there I've got all my stuff setting up. I need to get some more shelves, get everything organized better. It's getting there, slowly but surely. So I'll turn this light on. Now, get yourself some cubes, paint them black, paint them white. Get yourself some spheres, paint them black, paint them white. If you're really ambitious, you can get yourself plaster shapes, but they're kind of expensive. The first time I did this, I tried to make my own sphere and cone, and it looked like shit. Crap. Don't use styrofoam. That's the worst thing in the world because it's translucent. The light kind of goes through it, and it just screws everything up. This is a ball from a pool table, and it's perfect because it's got some gloss to it. It's white. It's kind of beat up, but still, it's a great little drawing thing. You can also use, sometimes I use old iPhone boxes. You can just kind of look around your house and find, like tin cans from cat food or whatever. Those are good to use. They're also good to store your charcoal in. I pretty much will pull things from all over the house. Dishes, plain white and black cups and saucers, rolls of toilet paper, You can if you want to, Jaira, but it's not a big deal. I am actually recording this, so and what I'm recording is only like if you guys talk, it won't pick up on the recording because I'm recording it through my computer, not through GoToMeeting. Um, you, I am recording this, so I will post it in both classes so that you can check it out. If you want to follow along, that's okay too. This is mostly informational. So just telling you, you don't have to spend a ton of money, but if you're in the observational drawing class, you definitely want to get yourself some basic objects because you're going to need it for the still life setup. And I really recommend getting basic plain shapes. I've got a couple more that I can show you that are really cool. Oh, and a couple of the things you'll want to get, and you should have these, if you have these in your studio or handy at hand at all times, you'll be better off in the long run. These make great drawing objects so that they're a little shiny, so it's nice to have a matte. That's why I like the painted balls, because they're not shiny. And you want to be able to show the differentiation between a shiny surface and a not shiny surface so that you can show texture and variety, right? Because you may know it to look at it, but how do you know to recreate it? You can get these at any craft store. I think I got these at Target. It was a set of 3 nesting boxes, and they were in the clearance bin. I love the clearance bin. I always look in the clearance bin for cool stuff that I can use in a still life. So if you haven't seen any of my still lives, I have a lot of them posted on Instagram and on DeviantArt, and I think there's a few recordings on Picarto from the last few times. I don't know if there's a drawing from a still life or not. But we'll be doing a lot of still lifes. But get these objects, get them now, get them set so you have, round ones and cylindrical ones and square ones, and nothing too complicated, nothing with patterns. And get yourself a couple of cheap cloth napkins, okay? Not washcloths, not towels. I swear to God, if one more student draws a terry cloth towel when I ask them to draw drapery, I am going to lose my mind. Yes, a sheet, a pillowcase, a T-shirt. I've actually had students drawing drapery from a photograph of drapery that they got off the internet, and it even has the stamp from the stock photo company. And I'm like, okay, you have no fabric in your house? No, I have no fabric in my house. Okay, so you're naked and you live in a cement room, right? Right? I swear, it's just you do not. I know you don't. You have a dog besides. I was so happy to see you as my student. Mhm. I know. This is the first time I've gotten to teach the perspective class. I'm really excited because I love perspective, and I always do perspective demonstrations. And it's so important to being able to draw realistically, whether you're drawing from life and observation or whether you're making stuff up. You want to make something look real, you better understand perspective. It's really the first thing. When I teach students how to draw myself, alone, one-on-one, the first thing I teach them is perspective. And then I teach them how to draw from looking at things. Because if you don't understand perspective, it makes it a lot harder to draw from looking at things. So I think they got the classes backwards. But who am I? Sorry? With me? Yeah, Croquis Cafe. Yeah. So pick up a few pieces of fabric. You can always go, if you're going to go to Joann's and get little wooden shapes, you can also get fake flowers, which look really pretty real and don't die, which is kind of nice if you want to paint flowers. And you can get scraps of paper from the, scraps of fabric from the scrap bin. Get a shiny one and get one that's not shiny so that you have an option. Don't do terry cloth because it's got a texture on it until you're ready to do texture. When you're ready to do texture, great. Knock yourself out. I instant messaged everybody too. I don't know why they didn't. There's like 20 people in that class, and only 2 of you showed up. Well, you know what? I should give a bonus 5 points to everybody who shows up on the first one. just Andrea. Andrea's from 120, right? And no, she's a virgin. Sometimes it's really boring, though. You have to admit, sometimes I am not on, but that's just sometimes it must get boring. There are some days when I'm just like, all I want to do is stick my head in a bucket and forget about the planet. But today I feel pretty good. So where were we? We were talking about basically the 2 classes go hand in hand. So observational drawing and perspective drawing kind of go hand in hand. If you're going to draw from your imagination, you really ought to know perspective. And if you're going to draw from observation, it just makes it a lot easier to kind of understand why things are doing what they're doing. So we'll start with the 1-point perspective. Make sure you have your ruler, and if you have one of those transparent rulers like the woman in the demonstrations has, that's pretty cool. I have one of them, but I just don't know where it is. I have too much stuff. I actually have a real drawing table, and I used to use one with a slide. I used to be you know how I got my start in commercial art was the first real job I had after the fast food place. It lasted like 3 weeks when I was 16. So I got a job in a print shop. And in the print shop, I did paste up and layout for business cards. We did them on light tables with, I'm going to so date myself, light tables with X-Acto blades and wax machines, which was actually an improvement on the rubber cement they used to use. And we had T-squares, the things, I have one here that has the end on it. You can slide that along your board and makes it so much easier to make straight lines going this way and that way. And if you have a T-square and a triangle, you can do all your verticals and horizontals without even thinking about it. If you don't, then you've got to be a lot more conscientious about how you do it. Now, I always try to set up my camera. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit first. I don't have my other 2 cameras plugged in, so I can't show you that. But I use on the computer, I use this drawing board that has feet on it, like that, so that it's angled up. And it really should be like when you're drawing at home, whether you're drawing, if you're not using an easel, whether you're using a drawing board, when you're drawing, you should have your board more like, I always put it against the table and lean it like this. So essentially what's happening is I'm looking at my paper from a 90-degree angle. So here's my board, here's the table, here's me, and my eyes are at 90 degrees. And that way, when I look up at either the model or the still life or the scenery or whatever, I'm looking at that at a 90 degree. Perpendicular is what I'm trying to say. If you draw with your drawing board flat, and you're not standing over it looking down from above, then what are you getting? You're getting a distorted look of your drawing. What happens when you are distorted? Well, instead of looking like flat on, like this, and you draw a square, and the square looks pretty square. And since I've been drawing long enough, I can kind of do it when it's not really square to my face, but I can compensate. After a while, you'll be able to compensate for that too. But if I was drawing it like this, looking down at my drawing board like this, it doesn't look square anymore. I mean, you're kind of faking that it's square because it's you can see the edges of the board. But if you can't see the edges of the board, that's no longer a square. That's a trapezoid, right? So if I were to draw a square that looked like a square from this point of view, Oh, let's see if I can do it. Just to see what it looks like when it's, whoops. I'm trying to imagine I'm not drawing on a flat surface. So it's too tall. That's how it should end up, too tall and too narrow, because it gets squished down. It's all optics. It's nothing really super confusing. It's just an optical illusion. In fact, you can use that. When they discovered perspective, they didn't invent perspective. Perspective has always been there. But if you read the history stuff, it's really super interesting. Oh my goodness. I wish they would teach more art history, because I think art history is fascinating. One of the things I learned when I took medieval art history was when they discovered the big change in art happened when they went from the flat iconographic drawings and paintings. Like the famous one is this, you'll all recognize it if you see it. It's like an altarpiece, right? And it has a Virgin Mary sitting on a throne with the baby Jesus, and the baby is all funny looking, and everything is flat. The background is gold. Her halo is totally round. I just went to the Met a couple of weeks ago and I saw Raphael painting that was of the Virgin Mary. And they had gotten, now that's like the beginning of they really got into perspective and they were super, super excited. They actually drew the halos like they were discs sitting on top of their head. Because if your halo is going to be like this and you tilt your head, that halo should tilt too, right? I mean, they overcompensated for that. But they started to, everything was in flat. Oh, and if there were other people in the scene, they were drawn like this tall. But they weren't considered far away. They were just considered less important. So a person was scaled relative to their importance, not relative to their position in space, because they didn't really understand how to do that. Once somebody figured out, hey, if this guy is really this tall, that means he's probably, he's far away from us. So he looks smaller, not because he is smaller, but just because he looks smaller. They call that diminution, I think, in the classroom. So that's a big change. It was like 1450 here to like 1550 here, when Raphael was drawing his three-dimensional people with the three-dimensional pedestals, and everything started to be in 3D with, you can draw something and it looks like it's real. And then, so what I was starting to say, what's really cool, is they took that to the next step. And because of that illusion of things getting smaller as they move away from you, when they sculpted statues that were going to be high up on a building, like 4th, 5th, 6th floors, like some of those Italian Renaissance buildings, they actually made the heads a little bigger than they were supposed to be, so that they didn't look like they were getting squished. But then they take those statues out and they put them in a museum, and all the guys in all these statues, certain statues that were used to be on really high buildings, now look like they all had big heads. And one of them is actually, its name is colloquially zucchini head, because he's got a big round bulbous head. But you can use that. You can use perspective and actually force it to make it even more dramatic, to accentuate your feeling and the sense of drama, or all kinds of things. You can get really close in on something and the perspective will slide out. They talk about this in the class too, with the perspective. If you have your horizon line like so, and your perspective points are close together, your vanishing points, these are vanishing points. If your vanishing points are closer together, that's going to be a much more dramatic, God, I don't think I can do it with a ruler right now because I'm too hyped up, because I'm so excited. But use your ruler and get your stuff going like this here. And that makes it really dramatic and squashed together, like so. And if it's in the middle, it comes up to you and, it looks really big and close. But if you have it, stop me if I'm not making any sense, please. Yes, it is actually. The head is a little bit bigger than it actually should be realistically. I'll tell you another thing about the statue of David. I'll tell you another thing about Renaissance figurative sculpture in general. The rule is, and I'm not kidding, but it's true, the rule is the penis must never be longer than the nose. Why? Because mentally, our mind, our eyes, because we are mammals, and that is, part of the whole way that humans interact with each other, are immediately drawn to that area. And so if you make it the size it actually is, it looks way too big. So when you're doing the statues for the church and for the just mythology and all that stuff, you do it, you understate that part of the anatomy, because if you make it realistically sized, it looks enormous. Only one? You've only learned one new thing today? I'm slacking on this. Okay. But man, yeah. Yeah, Michelangelo was just thought that the human figure was the epitome, the pinnacle, the highest of all creation was the human body, and the human male in particular. He didn't really like drawing women that much. In fact, I have a whole bunch of pictures that shows how Michelangelo was not keen on drawing women. He used to draw men with breasts mostly. Only one case that I absolutely know of for absolute sure, where the woman looks like a woman, and that is in the Sistine Chapel in the ceiling, where God is reaching out to touch Adam, and he's got all these angels and cherubs and all that stuff around him, and under his arm is Eve, and she looks very feminine. But then if you look at the next one where they've got Adam and Eve in the garden and the snake and the tree, she looks like a man with breasts. So I don't know. Go figure. So now if you want something to look a little bit more natural, you want to put your vanishing points way out, even beyond the edges of your paper, which is why they tell you to get, now I realize why they tell you to get the big paper, but square off a piece inside so you can put your vanishing points outside the paper, because that makes it look a lot more realistic. So when you draw, okay, I'll use my freaking ruler. I will use my tape. I will be a good girl, I promise. Do what you should. Clips. Everybody should get clips anyway. You can get these binder clips that you can just get at a Ace. I mean at a home Office Depot. Those work fine. The art clips that most people use are called bulldog clips, and I should have one here. These are the typical art class clips. They're really kind of crappy, but they work for certain things. If you don't get clips, or you can't use clips, or for some reason you don't want to use clips, you can use tape. I recommend using masking tape, but my masking tape dispenser is empty and I only have this crappy Scotch tape, so I'm going to use that instead. And tape your stuff down. It just makes things a lot easier. I'm sorry, Jaira. It's okay. I used to do these sessions earlier, but people wouldn't come because they were all at work. But I can do an early session if that's easier. I mean, if you have a day that your daughter takes a nap every time for sure, I can hold a session during that time, and whoever can come can come. So that would be fine. Just let me know when. Okay, so I'll put my perspective lines out there. So this is 2-point perspective. This isn't 1-point perspective, but I'm just going to do it to demonstrate. Don't bump my computer screen. This is how a triangle would really come in handy, because I could put the triangle against the flat edge of my drawing board and make it sure that it's vertical. And then you decide how tall you want that box to be. And make the sides. So the sides, remember the sides are parallel lines if it's a cube. If it is a true cube, like so, parallel lines are the same distance apart. They never meet. But in this world, in this imaginary world, they do meet. So you want to make them go to that spot. When you put your vertical, you kind of have to get more of a feel and eyeball. It's hard to estimate where the square would be exactly. I don't know if there probably is some kind of formula for that, the square optically, but it would require math, and I'm not up to doing math right now. So we'll just do this. So that's a 2-point perspective. It works like this. I'm going to tell you all 3 kinds of perspective at once. That's a good review for anyone who's already had perspective, and I think it's a good way to introduce it to people that soul-sucking polar vortex. Are you talking about the disappearing ice caps? Okay. Where are you? Where are you? Oh, just like Lori's in Chicago too. Yeah, I wouldn't go outside in this weather. I wouldn't. I mean, it's cold enough here, and it's not 0, but it's cold. It's in New York. We're not at negatives yet. I feel your pain. I do. Okay. Yeah, an exposed skin. They say it's colder than it's been in a lifetime. So be really careful. That's Lori. Lori's in Northern Illinois. Lori's an old-timer minion. Yes, she's a dinosaur minion. I'm gonna have special dinosaur minion cards made up for the old-timers. If you want to be a minion and you're not a minion yet, all you have to do is send me an email on that flyer that I post in the classroom about the drawing groups and say, make me a minion. Soon it will be automated. Right now I have to do it by hand. Okay. 3 kinds of perspective in our world. 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective. 3 kinds of lines in our little world. Horizontal lines, vertical lines, and converging lines. Okay. 1-point perspective has all 3 kinds of lines. 2-point perspective only has 2 kinds of lines. 3-point perspective only has 1 kind of line. That should help a little, or maybe it'll make it more confusing. I don't know, but there it is. I know, it's so fun. Okay. They all base on a theoretical horizon line. Now, I've thought a lot about why we have a horizon line and why we use 1-point perspective on the inside of rooms. That makes sense. Inside spaces usually have 1-point perspective, like inside tunnels, inside rooms, inside jail cells, inside whatever. Why do we have 2 vanishing points on the outside world? And I believe it's because our eyes are like this. Now, if we had eyes, if our heads were built like this and we had eyes like this, I think our whole world would be built on a vertical. Our whole existence would have 2 vanishing points this way instead. That's my theory. Anyway, I'm weird. So 1-point perspective is just like when I do this, I always think about Walmart and the monstrous hallways. They have some great pictures in the classroom of these long hallways or rows and rows and rows of shelves. So anywhere you look at, the trick with the 1-point perspective is the face of the cube, of the theoretical cube that is your world, is always facing you. So if you move it to the side far enough, you might see this side, you might see this side, you might see this side. You'll always see this side. You move it over here. You see how these lines, even in the camera, are going a little bit towards each other as they move away from you. So that's 1-point perspective. Everything goes to this one point here. Okay. 2-point perspective is if you were looking at the box on edge. So the box on edge on the horizon, you might only see the two sides. Let me put it like this so that it's even. And that one picture of the box spinning, if you look carefully, it's an isometric proportion, which just makes me crazy because isometric perspective is not perspective. It's like Zelda. It's the old Zelda side-scrolling games. So all your buildings would actually all you had were vertical and converging lines like that. I mean, not converging, vertical, horizontal, and diagonal, and that's it. So a Zelda house would look like that. So a house would be this big here, and if in the distance it would be the same size up there. So it doesn't. That's different. That's isometric. Don't do isometric. The closer you get to the camera, the more dramatic the lines angle. The closer you get to your eyeballs, the more dramatically they'll angle too. When you're doing so, all you have are the one horizon line. All your other lines are vertical or converging on 2-point perspective. Those are the two lines. Vertical lines, which are, for all intents and purposes, always straight up and down until you get to super big objects. And converging. And these are vertical, horizontal, and converging. So 3-point perspective. So this is a face. This is the front face square. This is the edge of the square. So this must be the corner, the point. You're looking directly at the point of the cube. So all the lines are converging. They're all converging somewhere. Where are they converging? There's 3 points of perspective. You have your 2 on the horizon, and then depending on where you are on the horizon, you'll either have a vanishing point high or you have a vanishing point low. So you're either drawing a pit, or you're looking over a cliff, or you're looking up at a building, or a floating spaceship, or a floating building. And all lines converge to one of those 3 points. Any questions so far? Nothing? Okay. Speak now or forever hold your peace. So when you do your 1-point perspective, your vertical and horizontal lines, you can just make a whole bunch of vertical and horizontal lines. They do talk about the footprint, and that's important. If you're doing this correctly, it won't be a problem. But for simple objects, and if you want to do a prism, you can. There's a bunch of ways of doing it correctly. An easy way to do it would be to go ahead and draw a square and then just cut it diagonally and then erase half of it and then just use these 3 points as your converging lines. So now you're going to draw, you've got the front face of your box, your object. I'll do one down here too. And I'll do one up here if there's room. A little bitty one right here. So I would put these like, this is the end shelves of the Walmart thing, and these are the overhead lights, and these are the tile floors. That's kind of what you can play with to make a scene in 1-point perspective. It's basically a room. It ends in the distance. But here's my vanishing point right here. So all my lines, all my edges of all of the planes of all of my objects must converge on that vanishing point. So this one, we're not going to see much. Barely going to see anything of that side because it's cut off and angled away from us. This one's going to go like this. My ruler's too long, but I couldn't find the shorter one. So we only see one side and one front. We don't see the top, this side, or this side, unless we draw through, which I'll do in a minute. You can always draw through and then erase the lines. I'll draw through with a different color. Oops, I missed that one. And a little tiny sliver. Oh, shit. I mean, shoot, of that. That's really bad. That's lousy craftsmanship. If you do that, do it over. I don't want to see that kind of garbage. Do it right. You can. I expect it. I demand it. I can do it. I'm just being a little lazy here. Okay. So here's all my converging points. Easy peasy pumpkin squeezy. All right. So let's go ahead and put in a different color for the opposite sides that are hidden, theoretically hidden, or in the case of a transparent box, it'll be that side and that side. No side here. Well, see, no, because it's the same side. No side there. We'll see this side here. So all of your points should have a line going from them to, all of your corners should have a line going from there to the center. Oh, I forgot to do this guy up here. Sometimes it's easier to put your pencil on the point corner, rest your ruler on it, and then rotate your ruler until it lines up with the other point. Or you can put your point in the center on the vanishing point and rotate your ruler to match up with your object. Makes a little pivot there. So that's great. And we've got these things that are streaking off into the background. But what are we going to do about, I lost my eraser as usual. Oh, come on. That's what I get for being unorganized. It's on this desk somewhere. It's probably under my drawing board. We need the rest of the horizontal lines. So taking back this, I'm going to do this in another color to do the back plane of our objects. So pretty much you can decide wherever your object, how long your object's going to be. That's your decision. There's no particular calculation required for that. So we've got this line, and then you'll put a vertical with your ruler, of course, and then another horizontal, and then vertical, and horizontal, and the vertical, and the horizontal. So this one, I've not done prisms. Prisms are a new thing for me. I have to think how that works. That would be the side. And this has got to meet up with that through vanishing point. Which is not going to give it any side at all. Hardly. Oh no, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. Of course, it's going to be the diagonal, the same diagonal as that. It's going to be exactly parallel to that. Maybe I jumped the gun with the prisms, but that's how you would do the prism. I thought that was something not working there. Normally, how you make a prism is you make a square or a rectangle and find the center, draw a vertical line, and this becomes your prism. Or you can cut it. Yeah. Well, let's say, let's go over that real quick with some more. We'll go over that next with a little more detail, because that was actually a newer concept. I didn't learn those first. I learned cylinders and spheres next, but when I was doing perspective. Okay. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. I would rather you do it a million times and get it right than, yep, yep. Okay. We'll talk about prisms a little bit because it's kind of interesting how that works. It's all right, Jara. I've got the recording going, so um, okay, James. And let's see. I'm sorry. I'm just throwing back through the. Yes. Okay, we're all good. So once you do that, you can erase the lines that you don't want, and you can color code the phases. So it's interesting because I was watching the videos myself because this is the first time I've taken this class. And it was interesting how she did the pitched roof. It was not what I expected. You know how those optical illusions will flip sometimes when you look at a cube? If it's drawn isometrically, you can flip it so the forward is back and the back is forward. It was doing that to me when I was looking at how she was drawing the pitched roof, although that's a later object. And then you can, if you want to, you can make these translucent, or you can actually make this an empty box. That's kind of fun too. So you're basically drawing this, the inside of a box with the lines going in. And that's fun. I would approve. If you wanted to make your box a lidless box, that would be fine. And then you want to start overlapping them. So you just got to watch that where they, I don't know if it's in your, you've probably gone through all the lectures by now. You're supposed to go through all the lectures before you do the first task, right? So in those lectures, you'll see they talk about the footprint. You want to make sure that when you draw your next box, the feet, it isn't going to be intersected. So the two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. So your next box would need to make sure that it isn't got a misaligned footprint. So you want to follow through on the whole, on all the bases to make sure that they don't overlap. Oh, this has got messy real fast. Let's see about those boxes. Let me tell you something about boxes. Cubes in particular. They called them all, I think they called them all rectangles if they're not actually cubes, whether they're like rectangular prisms. Now, this kind of jumps ahead a little bit because two-point perspective also includes what they call diminution, or no, they call it something else. I can't think of the word. Visual convergence or horizontal convergence. That's it. Horizontal and horizontal and vertical convergence, where like ties on a railroad track get closer together as they move away in the distance. All right, so take a square, any square. This is going to be our one-point perspective. You divide it corner to corner, you're going to find the center of the square. Keep in mind, if you were to draw a square in perspective, like so, this is really important. And I don't know if it mentions it. It might mention it in the book that we can't access, but this is something that I find really important. If I draw a square in perspective as if it's laying down, and I want to find the middle of that square, if I were to measure this and draw this, the middle right here, that would be inaccurate because the middle of the square is also in perspective. So you need to cross the corners, corner to corner, to find the middle of the square, and you can see that it's actually a longer space than this. That's one of the things that you'll see in observational drawing. You want to look for that kind of thing. So if you're drawing like a cereal box, and a cereal box looks like this, you want to make sure that your lines are all going like this, and the center of the box is going to be here, not here. If you draw it exactly, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, it's going to be wrong. It needs to be optically correct, not physically correct. Because, yeah, this box here is 2 inches, but this space is a unit, right? We talked about units in observational drawing where you measure with this sighting. You guys should all know sighting already. You've all been, oh no, the ones that are in observational drawing now will learn sighting. The ones that are in perspective should know sighting. but we will review it because people seem to forget that really easily. And some people haven't learned it in the first place because it's so confusing. It really has to be demonstrated. And I want feedback. Can you tell me how sighting works? If you can explain it and it's correct, then that's cool. You can move on to the next checkerboard square. But if you haven't, then you've got to do it over till you do. So a lot of people will draw their first observational drawing of a box. They might draw it more like they think they see it, which would be incorrect. And they wonder, why does my box not look like it's in space? Well, these lines, which are supposed to be parallel, are going in wildly different directions. And often it's the top. It's the thin line that usually ends up being the worst, the top of things for some reason. People always think they see more of the top of a box than they actually do. So you really have to get in there and measure how much optically from here to here. It's barely any space at all, right? It's like a fraction. But almost everyone's going to draw that like this, even if they don't see it like that. So it's the same thing with cups. You know, the distance in the space from here to here on an absolute vertical is like a third or a quarter of the distance of the whole cup on the vertical from here to here. So from here to here is a quarter of it, and then the rest of it is all the way down here. So all these things, it's as if you can put an imaginary grid across the front of it in order to place all the shapes correctly. Now, finding the center of the square means that you can, by going in the same direction parallel to your other edges, you will find the middle of each side. If your square is in perspective, like the one I just drew over, I'm going to do a kind of a wonky perspective. Let's see. Not like that. Let me start with a fresh sheet. That's why I use the cheap paper. It's just easier. All right. So I'm going to show you some magic about squares. Here's my vanishing points. There's also something that I learned from the documentation in the perspective class was about the, what's it called, the diagonal vanishing point? That was a new one. I'd never heard of that before. All these years I've been doing art, I've never heard of the diagonal vanishing point. But it was super interesting and made a lot of sense. Okay, so I'm going to make myself a square here in perspective. It could be like a Chinese rug. So if I think the center is there, because it's exactly the same, oops, even there, not there, here, exactly the same distance from here to here to here, I'm still not, I still can't, once you get into the perspective mode, it's hard to get out of it. You'll never make the same mistake once you get used to doing it like this. So find your center of your square. And while you're at it, you might as well get the diagonal to that 2-point perspective. Will want you to have that diagonal vanishing point. So here's the center of your square. So this center needs to be in between these two lines. So if you've already got this line to this vanishing point, this line needs to go to that vanishing point too, along with this line, which is already going to that vanishing point. Here, you've got one line already, and then you've got your second line, and then you've got your third line. So now I have found the center of each side. Oh, I didn't take this one all the way through. I found the center of each side of each line or each edge of the square. I hope that you can see that. I'll color it to help. Here's my square. And I've divided this line, this edge in half, this edge in half, this edge in half. But it's a different kind of half because if you measure it with a ruler, it's going to be different sizes. But optically, our optical illusion, our magic trick says that's divided exactly in half. Oh yes, the triangle. I will go ahead and build a big box. It's going to go above the horizon line. So this is going to be my house with a pitched roof. And often we will find that houses, generally speaking, will probably cross over the horizon line unless you're doing a high, okay, so there's also all those technical terms like worm's eye view, bird's eye view, low level, low angle, high angle, mid shot, all that stuff that you're going to need for storyboarding. This all can be used again in storyboarding. So the thing is that this kind of stuff you want to learn and never forget. You don't want to just take this class, okay, I've done that, move on, I'll never need it again. You will always need it again if you're going to go into storyboarding, if you're going to character design, if you're going to go to level design, you're going to go into interior design, you're going to go in anything you're going to do, you're going to need this if you're going to create the illusion of depth. If you don't give a hoot about creating the illusion of a depth, maybe you don't need it, but most of us do. So it was interesting because the demo that they gave in the classroom, bollocks. The demo they gave in the classroom, she made her pitched roof on the long side of the box, and it totally messed up my head. I did not get that. But we're essentially going to draw a prism on the top of the... whenever I get confused about which vanishing point to go to, I always say to myself, crisscross applesauce. Don't know why, but it works for me. It's always the opposite corner going to the vanishing point. This will help a lot when we do 3-point. Now, I won't torture you with 3-point right now because that's really difficult. Okay, so let me use something completely different. How about a green? I don't know if I have any greens. All right, so let's find, this is, I like to do it on this side. Here's the front of the house or whatever. We can even add a door. How convenient is that with a door handle? Now, we want to build the prism of the roof. So we need to extend the sides of this house up like so. And find the middle of the box again, or the side, the middle of this particular side. And then go straight up. Then how tall is our pitched roof going to be? Well, I'm going to make it a low pitched roof or a slow prism. So that's going to be the top of the prism. Then you take that corner. So essentially what you've done is you've got a rectangle. And we've already know where the center of the rectangle is. So you're going to take the top end of that rectangle and you're going to hook it to the bottom corners of the roof, like so. And that puts the peak of your roof is now a new line going to the vanishing point. And to figure out where this other line goes, you really have to build up from the back invisible wall so that you can find the center. You'll have to find the center of this square. If you're going to do it right and you want it to be absolutely accurate, you find the center of this square and take that up to that point, and that's where the end of the roof is. Okay, did that make sense? That's the first time that I ever tried to explain that. So I need to know if it made sense to anybody before you disappear, hopefully. I can always demo it again. And there's your house. So we really did 2 point, but you're going to be working with 1 point. I didn't do that much on the, okay, the observational drawing. Anybody left from there? Carla? Do you need any more help on the gestures? Because that's the, or the blind contour or the plant gesture. I can give you a quick tour of what it means to do a gesture, or we can do it on Thursday. No, I can't do it on Thursday. I'm not having one on Thursday. There is a pretty good demo that I posted that has demos, gesture drawings of plants and things. You're going to draw gestures of plants. Now keep in mind, even though you're drawing an object that's still, that's not moving, you are drawing with a gesture. So I will do a gesture drawing of this flower, just as an example. I'm going to put it there so you can see what I'm drawing, but I'm going to draw it from my point of view, just really quick. So the gesture is not so much that you're drawing with the movement of the plant as much as you are moving to create the drawing. That's how I try to interpret it, because the plant's obviously just sitting there doing nothing. But it still has lovely active lines. So we have a stem, a stem. So you would start your drawing with all the parts going to the different places. And then you might just keep your lines flowing, keep them moving. The most important part is that they're moving and you're constantly looking at your object and constantly looking at your paper so that you can see. It's really hard to talk and draw at the same time. But you're wanting to get a sense of flow and form that relates to the object that you are looking at. So it's all about what you're looking at, but it's not necessarily the way the object is moving, but the way that the lines have their own particular energy, even in a static object. So that's the short and sweet of the gesture drawing of a static object. And I will go into more detail on that next time, or if we need another session, we can do that. All right. I'm going to stop because it is 9:30 and you guys are all abandoning me. So ta-ta for now.